Everybody, welcome back. It's topic 4 of Unit 1, and we're going to take a deeper dive into what we talked about last time with the political dimension of sporting organizations with NGOs and IFs and sporting bingos. In this case, we're talking about specifically FIFA and the IOC. They'll come up most this semester, even though other of the IFs are relevant and important. Even some leagues are relevant and important on the international system. These two come up most often. First, because FIFA controls the World Cup and soccer, which is the most popular sport in the most places around the world, and the Olympics has that event, or those events if you count the Winter Olympics, that brings countries together and provides a dynamic way for states to be able to interact with each other and accomplish both sporting goals and political goals. So, FIFA and the IOC. This is a bit repetitive from last time, but I want to emphasize it, right? FIFA is a sporting bingo. The IOC is a sporting bingo, but only FIFA is an IF. The IF is the federation, international federation that controls a sport, and the Olympics controls access there. All the way in Unit 4, we'll look at politicking about sports, and that's basically looking at countries attempting to get certain sports added to the Olympics because they see themselves as having an advantage in it. They're liable to win medals, and how other countries reject that. Like they'll try and kick a sport out if it has too few adherents or if it's seen as a medal grab. One of the ways this plays out is the way the IOC worked with IFs that had sports coming out of events like the X Games that were very exciting winter sports, but really only practiced in a handful of Western-based states. And what you see is the United States rocket up the Winter Olympics medal table because we had athletes early on in doing things like aerial skiing and snowcross and these fun events to watch, but which were not widely competed around the world. Even for a winter sport, not widely competed. And there's countries like Russia that are upset that we have this new advantage that they lack. So the IOC has this role as the gatekeeper of which sports make it into their places. Now, there is relative influence. So if we're going to talk about FIFA and the IOC as the two biggest, so you would say that FIFA is the lone IF that has more power than the IOC. So as I mentioned, the IOC is the gatekeeper who gets to participate in their event. And the event is seen as in some senses a kingmaker, as a way to give some sports advantages over others in the global marketplace, and countries to have chances to win. So you will see like a country like India, which it is one of the two largest countries in the world, but it doesn't win very many medals. And one of the reasons it doesn't win many medals is because the sports it participates in are not in the Olympics, and that could frustrate them. So they would like to see their sports get in, which would give them a better chance at a medal, and that would be important to them. But the IFs didn't want that access, but FIFA has an ability to deny the IOC its best athletes, and they can get away with it. Now, other sports can't do it. So, international basketball, FIBA, it has to agree to send the best available athletes to the games, or the Olympics will kick FIBA out and have other sports come in its place. But FIFA's different. So, the IOC wants the Olympics because it's the IOC wants soccer because it's a popular sport. But the FIFA, the IF for soccer, does not want full national teams competing. In other words, the teams that are in the Men's World Cup, because in so doing, they fear they will dilute the value of the Men's World Cup. So you send a youth team to the Olympics. It's the only sport where that's allowable. Everywhere else, if an IF tried to get away with that, FIFA would say no. Now, I would be interested to see what happens in a couple more years as the popularity of the Women's World Cup and the women's, like the UEFA Cup that happened this summer in England, as that increases and the visibility grows, if FIFA will also put down its foot and say we're only going to send youth soccer teams to the Olympics, if they'll get away with it or not. So right now, but otherwise, it's the IFs that have that need to to give in to the IOC to make sure they're there. Now, there are very few leagues that are more powerful than their IFs, but they're not more powerful than the IOC. Okay, so the NBA is more powerful than FIBA. The NHL, the National Hockey League, is more powerful than the IHA. And the NFL is much more powerful than global football. So, but they're not more powerful than the IOC. So what you see is like the NBA wishes the rules that were used at the Olympics and an international sport competition, for example, the shape of the key underneath the basket, and it used to be the 3-point line was different, and there's certain other small quirky things that the NBA can't get changed, but it does have the ability to withhold. Same thing with Major League Baseball. So the 4 big sports leagues in the United States have this ability to ignore their IFs, except when they want to do stuff on an international level. And if they want to promote the game internationally, then they have that need. One of the interesting things we'll see this semester is that FIFA and the IOC have something that people want. Either it's access, it's hosting, it's the appeal to their populaces. It gives them a bargaining position, and in a way that only the largest of corporations typically have when they're negotiating with a country, to put a manufacturing plant or headquarters or something. They can make deals that otherwise would seem like the states typically would have more power. But FIFA and the IOC can strike deals that seem odd and seem like they're getting one over on them. And that's because people within the countries, they're interested. And because they're interested either with their votes, with their dollars, it could be the governments themselves, it could be corporations, it could be broadcasters, even the federations themselves, they are interested in what the countries do vis-a-vis the sporting bingos, especially FIFA and the IOC. And that gives those two entities power. We'll see some interesting examples through the course of the semester of when the Olympics and the World Cup are able to do something that would seem impossible. So what do they offer? So let's start down here in the bottom. So this is events and hosting and participating. Let's just start with hosting. So here's a picture of Pita Taufetofua. He's Tongan. He competed in Taekwondo in 2016 and cross-country skiing in 2018. And he came into the opening ceremonies shirtless, wearing traditional outfit in Tonga and oiled up to the rafters. Now, he became a social media and global media sensation. And Tonga already cares about the opening ceremony. So you have to think about where a small country gets visibility on the global stage. So yes, Tonga's a UN member state. They are in negotiations at the UN, but that doesn't resonate outside the UN at all. And if you need people, we go back to this slide here, if you need people, as in citizens who are voters and consumers, etc., and governments to care about something. So if you're Tonga, and you are threatened by sea level rise in the Pacific, and you want people to care about you, where do you get that moment where people come to care about you? So one of the moments historically has been in the Parade of Nations at the opening ceremonies of the Olympics. And he found a way to really make a splash. And so if you look at internet traffic for searches for Tonga, if you look at tourism expenditures in the year after this in Tonga, this had a resonating moment for Tonga because of his I would call it performance, not in the games, because he didn't win a medal or anything, and when he made it to the Winter Olympics, he barely even knew how to ski. He'd only been skiing for like 12 weeks. But this moment, and he did it again in 2018 when he came into the Winter Olympics the same way. So it really mattered and got Tonga notoriety in a different way. Hosting is sort of the same way. So countries want to host events because it gives them stature, global stature. And if you really want to see how it starts, it's 1968 in Mexico City, where the Mexican government feels welcomed into the family of nations that are capable of hosting an event when they're named to host the Summer Olympics in 1968. We'll come back to this idea in subsequent units. The sports themselves, the events themselves also matter, gives countries a chance to get there, right? So you want to have that access because you want your country to get that notoriety. So this is Kip Keino at the apex here of a jump in the steeplechase. He's one of the first international athletes I knew of. He competed in the 60s and 70s for Kenya. And then he also started, he was named the Sports Illustrated Sportsman of the Year once. My family subscribed to Sports Illustrated. It used to be a weekly magazine. And at the end of the year, they'd have this profile of somebody who had done remarkable things. And he had an orphanage open. He did some other interesting things. And I read all about him and got to know him. So the sport themselves, the events themselves, they also have, right? So that's what they have to offer. Now, who are they? We're going to talk about members often and member states. And so this gets a little bit confusing because both FIFA and the IOC have a decision-making body that is not made up of the federations always. There are some things in which the national federations or the NOCs decide upon, but the lion's share of things come from the FIFA Council or from the IOC member. So when you say IOC member, like if you say FIFA member, what you're talking about would be something like FUFA. So FUFA is the Federation, of Uganda Football Association. So the FUFA. They're a member of FIFA and they get a vote. But FIFA also has an executive council, or they have a council now. It used to be called the executive council, now it's a council. 37 representatives from around the world, divided out into different regions, etc. And so those are the difference between a member and a council member. IOC members, International Olympic Committee members, are these individuals, not representative of their governments always, but sometimes, even though they're not supposed to be. And so they make decisions that impact the NOCs. So a NOC is a National Olympic Committee. So if we've got a second acronym to keep in mind today besides the IF, it's the NOC, the National Olympic Committee. So this is just the symbol of the United Arab Emirates, NOC. And so they do have an organizing responsibility for all Olympic sports and for the Olympic team going to an Olympic Games. They partner with the IFs and with their local federations, their domestic federations, to get things done. But the actual IOC members are these individuals. There's 105 of them there. So there is lots of opportunity both for corruption and for influence. So they can wield their power for ill or good. And one of the themes that will certainly come up many times this semester is the Qatar World Cup 2022, which has been pending for more than a decade and then happening this semester. So the red card for FIFA, there's people protesting FIFA's decision because by awarding the tournament to them, then you have the deaths of migrant workers, thousands of deaths of migrant workers. It's a big deal. Workers' rights is a big deal. So there's a lot of pressure, and the corruption can also come through construction contracts and kickbacks. Or the Olympics scandal, you'll see Nagano and Salt Lake City listed specifically here. That's 1998. And 2002 Olympics, FIFA, the members, these folks back here in this picture, who decided on who would be the host. It used to be that they wouldn't vote for you unless you bribed them. And so both Salt Lake City and Nagano tried to bid several times and lost out to bids that offered bribes. And so it got to a point where they also offered bribes because they wanted to win. On the flip side, they have an ability to wield pressure that otherwise wouldn't work. So here's Sarah Attar. She's here on the right. She's the first female athlete to compete for Saudi Arabia in the Olympic Games 2012. 2 in 2012, 4 female athletes in 2016. So the Olympics in 2014, the IOC passed a statement in their charter. I don't know if it's added to the charter formally or not, but it basically says that gender equity needs to be achieved. And so a country like Saudi Arabia, where it had been illegal for athletes to compete in some contexts or just opportunities limited, is required now to bring female athletes to the game. So they can also influence things the way we want. And nations can push back on this. And the FIFA corruption will be a theme we talk about later in the semester. 2015 was sort of a sea change when some parts of the Swiss government and then the U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch went after him and went after corruption at the highest levels of FIFA. It's a big deal, and she's considered a badass in a lot of circles that study these sorts of things and look at FIFA and corruption. So they're not quite all powerful, right? They've got some things, but they do have this thing that people want, and so they're in a good bargaining position, and that will bring us to the future.